James Murray for His Majesty's Opposition is here this morning. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So if the Minister had his way, migrants would be on those planes tomorrow.
Well, they're not getting their way, though, are they? This is their flagship policy, and it's in tatters. And I think they've been shown just how badly thought through it's been. We've always said it's unworkable and it's not the right thing to do. Now they know it's also unlawful. And I think what they should really be doing is, rather than keep trying to push this policy through, which they know is not going to work, they should follow our plan instead about getting the backlog down and spending the money on a cross-border police force to tackle the criminal gangs who are smuggling people in the first place.
Not quite as straightforward as that. The Lords didn't say, the Lords in the Supreme Court didn't say that it was generally unlawful. It was just that they felt that Rwanda was not a safe country for people to be sent. So they weren't saying third-party countries was a bad idea.
But I think they were also very clear that it cuts across a lot of international conventions and a lot of international laws which we're signed up to. And, you know, frankly, for the government to get to this stage of their flagship policy and not have done their work on whether it's against international law in various different ways, it just seems bizarre, you know. So not only is it unworkable and we've always thought it's the wrong approach, but it's also against various conventions the government signed up to. So I think it's really time for them to take stock and think again. And, you know, we've got a plan which we've been talking about for many months about getting the backlog down, which would help cases to be processed, reduce the bill for hotels and so on. We've talked about putting the money into a cross-border police force to tackle the criminal gangs who are smuggling people in boats across the Channel in the first place.
They're doing that anyway.
Well, they've had 13 years, and look where we are. You know, I think there were 600-odd crossings last Sunday alone. You know, so this problem is not going away under the government, and they don't.
Year on year.
They've had 13 years to get on top of this problem, you know, and now they're still trying to push through a policy which they've been told isn't going to work. And, you know, the Court of Appeal said that even if their Rwanda plan did work, it would be, I think, 100 people would actually go to Rwanda a year. You know, it's not...
You're saying 100 people and £140 million cost is not value for money?
Well, we set out very clearly how that £140 million should be better spent. And actually, if you spent it on that cross-border police force, if you focus on getting the backlog down, you could get on top of the crisis that they've created in immigration system and in processing the cases of people who arrive across the Channel. What
do you want to hear from the autumn statement on Wednesday? Which basically is a November budget. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, so it's a really critical point for the Chancellor to set out what the government are doing to help people across the country, to help the economy, and that's what they should be doing. They should be tackling the cost of living crisis and they should be getting the economy growing. So we think, for instance, they should be investing in clean energy and insulating homes to get energy bills down. They should be reforming planning to get homes built, to bring down the cost of housing. And they should be bringing down the NHS waiting list to make sure that, obviously, people can get seen sooner, but also to help people who are long-term sick back into work. So there's plenty the government should be doing, but they should be focusing on tackling the cost of living crisis and getting the economy growing.
And they will say that that's what they're going to do?
Well, the 13 years of budgets we've seen so far have given evidence to the contrary. They haven't been doing that very well for the last 13 years.
As a result, he's got a lot more money in his fiscal headroom, which means basically more money to spend. As a result of the fact that they've managed to bring down inflation, you're going to say the Bank of England have done that? Well, the
Bank of England does have its responsibility for interest rates and the inflation target. And also, we don't know what the fiscal headroom is yet. We'll see what that is on Wednesday. There's been various different announcements on that.
25 billion, did I read?
Well, I think the figures go up and down quite a bit day to day, depending on who's briefing who from number 10 and number 11. But I think if you look at their budgets and their approach over the last 13 years, we've had 13 years of low growth. You know, if the economy had been growing over the last 13 years at the same rate it had under the Labour government before 2010, people would be thousands of pounds better off now.
I remember that note from Liam Burns saying there's no money left when you lot left.
Well, the economy had been growing at a far stronger rate under the Labour government.
And so you spent it all?
Well, the economy was in a better state, and that meant that people were better off. And I think that's what economic growth actually means in terms of people's lives. You know, it doesn't mean something completely abstract, detached from people's lives. It is how well off are people, how well off do households feel, how are family finances. So if you get the economy growing, people are better off. You've got more money coming in for public services, and we're in a much better position as a country.
Now, what's happening behind the scenes when it comes to your leader trying to keep everyone focused and together over the situation in the Middle East? A third of his parliamentary party voting against him, basically, last week over a ceasefire, that can't continue.
Well, look, I think it was obviously a difficult week last week, and I think that there are people who are calling for a ceasefire, and I completely understand why people are calling for that. I think what does unite all of us in the Labour Party and beyond, in fact, and other MPs and across the country, is that we all want the violence to end. We all want a lasting peace, and the debate that we've been having is about how we get to that lasting peace.
I understand that, Shadow Minister, but my point is not that. My point is that a third of his MPs voted against him. You can't have that. He's not even in government yet. What's it going to be like even when you're in government?
I think people feel very strongly about this issue, and Kay's obviously listened to what other members of Parliament have been saying, but he has to come up with a way forward. He has to come up with a response on behalf of the Labour Party. He has to come up with something that he thinks is credible and deliverable, and that's why we set out our motion.
But it's the principle that a third of his party voted against him. It's the principle.
Well, the principle here, I think, I will take it back to this point, which I think is really important, that all of us want an end to the violence. That's the principle that we all want to pursue. We all want to pursue a lasting peace. Where the debate has been focused is about how we get to that lasting peace. But I think there's total unity around that desire for that lasting peace. And actually, that's not just about what happens right now in the conflict. It's also about once we do get to a lasting peace, once the violence ends, a focus on a two-state solution and making sure that we solve the problem between Israel and Palestinian people that has been going on for so many years.
There will be other conflicts, though, where he may well find himself having to bring his party together. And again, I come back to the point, he cannot allow a third of the parliamentary party to vote against him and embarrass him in that way.
Look, I regret the fact that some colleagues couldn't vote for the same position or didn't take the same position as Keir Starmer. Obviously, some of the front benchers resigned because they didn't agree on that position. But I think now that we are where we are, having gone through that process last week, what we need to do is focus on what we really agree on. And as I said, the lasting peace, the route to that lasting peace is where the debate has been focused. But that focus overall on a lasting peace and on what happens after the violence, this current violence ends, is really crucial, because there's such a strong feeling, certainly in the Labour Party in Parliament, and I think further across Parliament and across the country, that we want that lasting peace now. We want the violence to end, this horrific violence we've seen over the last 6 or so weeks. But we also want to make sure that when the violence does come to a lasting end, we have a focus on a two-state solution.
OK. Shadow Minister, it's always good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much.
Very much.